All right, let's dive into another deep dive. We got a really interesting one this time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so someone sent us this YouTube video. It's called Understanding the Origins of Kabbalah. It's from this channel,
Right.
IT Calogero Grifossi Investigations, Italiano.
Okay,
It's
interesting.
in Italian, but we've got transcripts and translations.
Of course.
But it's wild. It's an interview, but it's done under hypnosis.
Oh, wow.
And they're trying to kind of get at the history of Kabbalah through this interviewee under hypnosis.
Like trying to tap into some like past life knowledge or something.
Yeah, like some kind of hidden memory or something like that. Hypnosis, it's not really your typical historical research method,
No, not
but,
really.
who knows? Maybe it can shed some light on things, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you never know what you might find. It's definitely a unique approach.
Totally. So what struck me right away is how vivid the interviewee's memories are.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like they describe the very beginning of Kabbalah. They're under hypnosis
Right.
and they're seeing this scene. It's like a desert oasis. There's this group of elders, there's a female student,
Okay.
and they're using these simple objects like pebbles and twigs to represent these big spiritual concepts.
Interesting. So they're trying to like physically manifest these complex ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Like a very hands-on, almost primal way of understanding and sharing this profound knowledge?
Yeah, it's like a very organic approach to exploring these mystical concepts.
Totally. And it sounds kind of peaceful in a way, right? This idea of knowledge being shared so openly.
Right? Yeah.
But then things take a turn. The interviewee brings up this horned entity, and they actually name it Baphomet.
Maphone. Now that's a loaded term.
I know, right? Like, immediately you think of certain imagery, certain associations.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a neutral term. It
Right.
evokes ideas of like forbidden knowledge or something darker.
Exactly. And the interviewee sees this entity, this Baphomet, as a corrupting influence on Kabbalah.
Okay, so they're suggesting it was this entity that shifted the focus away from open sharing.
That's right. They see it as a shift towards something more guarded, more manipulative even. It's like the knowledge became something to be hoarded and controlled rather than freely given.
That's interesting because it kind of mirrors how esoteric knowledge is often portrayed, this idea that it's dangerous in the wrong hands.
It's true. So the interviewee then goes on to talk about how Kabbalah was actually used throughout history.
Okay.
And it wasn't just, all about mystical enlightenment or whatever.
Right.
They actually link it to some very practical things. Like they talk about trade.
Trade.
Yeah, like commerce, accumulating wealth. They even specifically mentioned the international salt trade as an example.
The salt trade. Now that's a blast from the past. I never would have connected that to Kabbalah.
Me neither. But they suggest that these early practitioners of Kabbalah, they had this deep understanding of supply and demand, almost like, ancient economics.
That's fascinating. So they're suggesting it wasn't just a mystical system, but also a practical tool.
Exactly. It had real-world applications.
Wow. So who are these early practitioners?
Well, the interviewee mentions merchants, some nobility, certain Jewish communities as groups that kind of utilized Kabbalah.
Interesting.
But here's the thing, and this is where it gets kind of dark again. The interviewee claims that Kabbalah wasn't always used for good.
Oh.
They suggest it became a tool to actually maintain power.
Maintain power.
Yeah, like to manipulate the masses through fear, keep them in check kind of thing.
That's a pretty heavy accusation. Are they claiming it was used intentionally for that purpose?
Yeah, they seem to think so. They even compare it to like how the church used its power in the past, controlling information,
Yeah.
instilling fear to keep people in line.
Right. It raises questions about how easily knowledge can be twisted and used for less than noble purposes.
And that leads us to like the most controversial part of the video. You ready for this?
Hit me with it.
They connect Kabbalah to the banking system. Yeah. They're claiming that what started as a relatively innocent use of Kabbalah in trade, it evolved into this rotten system of financial control.
Hold on. They're saying Kabbalah is somehow behind the banking system as we know it today?
That's what they're implying. Like
Okay.
they describe this progression from early Kabbalah, used for things like improving trade routes or whatever, to this more complex system.
Okay.
And they believe that this system eventually became corrupted.
Yeah.
It's all about manipulating people through debt, keeping them financially dependent.
That's a bold claim, to say the least.
It is. And they say that this abuse of power, this is what led to some pretty bad consequences. They actually talk about a Sodom and Gomorrah type event.
Whoa, really? Like a biblical level catastrophe?
Yeah, that's the comparison they make. They describe this city totally consumed by luxury and excess, and it's ultimately destroyed, right?
Destroyed.
Yeah, like a warning against unchecked greed and manipulation.
It's a pretty stark image.
It is. And it brings up this question that I think keeps coming up, right?
What's that?
Like, what happens when knowledge and power, when they're concentrated in the hands of a few? And how do we even know, like, as individuals, what's the real intention behind the information that we're getting?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Figuring out who to trust, what sources to believe. It's a constant challenge.
Totally. So now we're going to get into what the interviewee calls, like, the mystical heart of Kabbalah.
Yeah,
Ready?
please lay it on me.
They're talking about the Sefer HaZohar.
The Sefer HaZohar. Now we're getting into the good stuff.
Right. Also known as the Book of Splendor. And their description of it is, well, let's just say it's a little out there.
Out there how? Don't leave me hanging.
They describe it as this semi-tangible, etheric book. Like, it's not entirely physical.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
And they say it was delivered alongside these hallucinogenic candies.
Wait, what? Hallucinogenic candy.
I know, right?
That's where it gets a little wild.
Yeah, but it makes you think about, like, Kabbalah's emphasis on altered states of consciousness.
Right.
Right? Like, you need to access a different state of mind to really understand this stuff.
Right, like a key to unlock the hidden knowledge. So what kind of knowledge are we talking about here? What's in this Book of Splendor?
Buckle up. It's pretty mind-bending. They describe it as like a cosmic Google, right?
A cosmic Google.
Yeah, containing information about like everything.
Yeah.
Other dimensions, different planets, even the ability to manipulate reality itself.
Whoa. Okay, so if this knowledge is so powerful, so accessible, why aren't we all like bending spoons with our minds right now?
That's where this concept of the tree of life comes in.
The tree of life?
Yeah, you know, that symbolic diagram that's central to Kabbalah. It represents like the structure of reality, all that.
Right.
The interviewee believes it acts as a filter,
Mm-hmm.
like limits access to the full scope of this Book of Splendor.
Oh, so it's like we have the map to the universe, but we're only allowed to visit certain places.
Exactly. So we have this incredible source of knowledge that could be really dangerous in the wrong hands, right?
Yeah.
And then we have this tree of life filter, kind of controlling access.
Like a cosmic game of hide and seek with the universe's secrets.
Exactly. But get this. The interviewee says, even all this, it's about to change.
Change how?
They say we're moving into a new era, right?
Yeah.
And that Kabbalah is becoming obsolete.
Obsolete. That's a big statement. What's replacing it?
They describe something called the Stargate, but it's not the, the TV show.
Right.
It's more like this metaphorical representation of a shift in energy, consciousness, all that.
Okay.
And they believe that this Stargate, it's filtering out negative elements, leading to a world where, get this, intuitive knowing replaces reliance on like external sources like the Kabbalah.
So are we all about to become psychic or something?
Maybe, who knows? But they're saying that like all this external knowledge, it's not going to be as important anymore.
Fascinating. What happens to those who are like still clinging to the old ways of knowing?
Well, the interviewee believes there's going to be a split, like a literal split in reality.
Split in reality.
Yeah. Those who are aligned with this source, they're going to experience this world of abundance and wonder, and everyone else, well, not so much.
So like a divergence of destinies based on how you choose to access knowledge.
That's what it sounds like. It's definitely a lot to unpack. So far, we've gone from the origins of Kabbalah to the Book of Splendor to the Stargate and like a potential split in reality.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
And we're just getting started. Let's dive a little deeper into how the interviewee claims Kabbalah was actually used throughout history.
I'm ready when you are. So the interviewee, they actually go into some detail about how in the early days, Kabbalah was used for some pretty practical stuff.
Really? Like what?
Well, they talk about trade and commerce and stuff. They mention caravans and like maritime trade routes.
Yeah.
And get this, they even talk about how some of these principles of Kabbalah were used in the international salt trade.
The soul trade.
Yeah. And it's like super specific, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that. So it wasn't all like mystical rituals and hidden knowledge then.
Right. It sounds like they were using it for like real world application.
Like ancient business secrets or something?
Yeah, exactly. And they make it sound like it wasn't about like exploiting people or anything. Like it was more about using this knowledge to improve their livelihoods, like communal betterment.
That makes sense. But then it changed, right? It became more about power and control.
Yeah, that seems to be the gist of it. It's interesting though, right?
Yes.
Like, was this shift towards control inevitable, as Kabbalah spread? Or were there other things going on?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because the interviewee describes how, as Kabbalah spread, it became associated with all these different groups.
Okay.
Merchants, nobility, certain Jewish communities.
Right.
And they suggest that with this wider adoption, the intentions behind it kind of shifted.
So like what was once about personal growth, helping the community,
Right.
it became more about power.
Yeah, that's the picture they paint.
Mm.
And they actually use this word creeping to describe how it happened.
Creeping. That's an interesting word choice.
Right. Like it suggests this gradual takeover, rather
Yeah.
than like some blatant grab for power.
Right.
And this ties into what they were saying about how certain individuals, they started hoarding knowledge,
Okay.
using it to gain an advantage over others.
So instead of sharing it, it became...
A weapon, almost. Yeah. And we
Yeah.
start to see this hierarchy emerge, right? Where
Wow.
those who have access to specific Kabbalistic principles, they're able to manipulate those who don't.
Right. Okay.
And they say that this manipulation, it went beyond just financial gain.
Mhm.
They're talking about shaping beliefs, controlling narratives.
So keeping people in the dark.
Yeah, keeping them in a state of fear, which again brings us back to this whole banking thing.
Right. Right. Okay. So let's unpack that a bit more.
Okay.
How does the interviewee connect early Kabbalah to like the banking system that we have today?
Well, they describe it as this progression, right? From using Kabbalah in trade and commerce to developing a more sophisticated financial system.
Okay.
And they describe this scene, this city, consumed by luxury and excess.
Like completely out of touch with reality.
Exactly. Totally disconnected from the struggles of everyday people.
So like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, that's the comparison they make.
Wow.
They see this city as a microcosm,
Uh-huh.
right, of what they believe is this, corrupted financial system,
Right.
driven by greed and this, like, relentless pursuit of power.
And they're saying this pursuit of power, it wasn't just about money.
Right. Right. They describe it as wanting to control the very fabric of society.
So debt becomes a way to like
Enslave people. Yeah.
to keep them under control.
Exactly. Keep them beholden to those in power.
Wow. Okay, so we have this complex web of influence, right?
Yeah.
With Kabbalah allegedly woven into trade, power structures, religion, and now banking.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And it raises some really big questions. Like, who controls the information? Who benefits from these systems? And how can we, as individuals, even begin to navigate a world where these power dynamics are so hidden?
It's tough, right?
It is. Let's dig into this Kabbalah banking connection a bit more. The interviewee mentions a specific point in time where they believe this rotten system, as they call it, really took hold.
Yeah, they describe it almost like a flashback to this
Uh-huh.
city, obsessed with opulence and extravagance, like a snapshot of the moment they believe the financial system became, irrevocably corrupted by greed.
It's a very dramatic interpretation.
It is.
I mean, is there another way to understand this part of their story?
Well, it could be symbolic rather than literal, right?
Yeah, maybe.
It's important to remember we're dealing with one person's perspective shared under hypnosis.
Right.
So it's good to consider different interpretations.
Totally. I mean, we're not here to endorse any specific viewpoint.
Exactly.
Just explore these ideas, encourage critical thinking,
Right.
understand the concepts without, drawing conclusions that could be harmful or biased.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating, right, how this interview, even though it's so unusual,
Yeah.
it touches on these themes that are so relevant today. Like, we see how knowledge can be both liberating and oppressive,
Right.
and how important it is to recognize that a lot of the narratives we're presented with,
Uh-huh.
they often have hidden agendas.
So it's a reminder to,
Question everything.
yeah, question the sources, the information that shapes our reality.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've explored Kabbalah's past,
Right.
these alleged connections to power structures, religion, finance.
Mhm.
Now let's look at what the interviewee says about the future.
Okay.
Because they claim that Kabbalah itself is becoming, get this, obsolete.
Obsolete. Why?
They say it's because we're entering a new era. And this is where they bring up this Stargate idea again. This Stargate thing. It's not like that sci-fi show with the ring that transports people, is it?
No, not at all. It's more of a metaphor,
Oh,
The interviewee is using it to describe this, like, massive shift in energy and consciousness.
Right.
They're basically saying that it's ushering in a new era
Okay.
where we're not going to have to rely on external sources of information anymore.
So like instead of systems like Kabbalah, we're going to have more direct access to knowledge, like intuitively.
That's what they seem to be saying. Like they're implying that Kabbalah, with all its complex symbolism and rituals and everything,
Right.
it served a purpose for a certain time, for a certain stage of human development.
Okay.
But now we're evolving. We're tapping into this more intuitive way of knowing.
Like we've been using a map to navigate.
Yeah.
And now we're developing this internal compass.
Exactly.
But the interviewee says not everyone is ready for this upgrade.
Right. They talk about this split in reality.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild idea.
It is.
This idea that people who are aligned with the source, whatever that is,
Right.
they're going to experience this amazing new world.
Abundance, wonder, the whole 9 yards.
And everyone else is going to be, like, left behind.
That's the implication, yeah.
Kind of a scary thought, actually.
It is. It makes you think about what it really means to, to know something.
Right.
Is it about memorizing facts and figures? Or is it about something deeper?
Yeah, like connecting with your intuition.
Exactly. Cultivating that inner wisdom.
So it all comes back to that, huh?
It seems to. And, it's interesting how this interview brings up so many big questions.
It really does. We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
We started with the origins of Kabbalah, talked about how it's been used and misused throughout history, its connection to power structures, religion, finance, and now this whole Stargate concept, a shift in consciousness, a potential split in reality.
It's been quite the deep dive.
It has. And even though, this interview was conducted under hypnosis, which is a little out there.
It is unconventional, for sure.
It still brings up some universal themes, like knowledge, power, the choices we make as individuals.
Exactly.
It really challenges us to question everything, the information we consume, the sources we trust.
Absolutely. And to remember that true knowledge, it's not static, It's a process of discovery, questioning, expanding our understanding.
Well said. So if you had access to this vast cosmic library of knowledge, what would you search for? It's something for all of us to think about.
It is, yeah. Food for thought.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. See you next time.